Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video, and I got a request for more Survival Hunter content here on YouTube. So in today's video, we're going to be covering the Survival Hunter and whether or not you should main it, what's the type of player that it is for, and as always, if you want to stay up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, educational and entertaining content, then smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. Now for the Survival Hunter, I would put this class at about medium to medium advanced. It's definitely more towards the top end of complexity, and this is due to a lot of your abilities having some drawbacks to them. A lot of your mobility requires a lot of aiming, a lot of premeditated play. Your cooldown ramp also can take quite a bit, as we're seeing at the beginning here with me going coordinated assaults into spearhead. This is just a lot of cooldowns you got to stack together, but the payout of stacking them together is that you can peak like 2 million burst DPS here against this shaman and warrior, and it's a nice kind of flex play style of knowing like when do you need to be offensive, when do you need to be defensive. So using disengage, it's multi-purposed. We're going to pop our survival to fittest here to reduce damage. They definitely increase the survivability of Survival Hunter, but your pet can end up being a really big liability. So our pet goes down here, and I kind of go for a YOLO res pet, but honestly using Aspect of the Turtle to immune being disrupted on it is generally a safer line of play. I love this little combo when you put a binding shot on the ground and you can use explosive trap to knock enemies through it to guarantee the stun and peel for yourself. It's just a really cool combo that you can get against your opponents, and there's a really heavy focus at the moment on making sure that you press Aspect of the Turtle before you die, which is a problem that I have. I've been doing a lot of 2400 challenges in solo shuffle. I just completed Elemental Shaman. I've completed Holy Paladin recently in this last week. I'm getting really close on a lot of the other ones, and even on Survival Hunter, I'm only now a couple of rating away from it, but getting caught off guard and getting bursted really hard and not keeping men pet on your pet is probably the most common mistake that I see for myself and that I see from other survival hunters, because your pet does get kind of chopped. It's in melee range with you all the time. Roar of Sacrifice really does actually cleave a lot of damage because you're standing next to your pet most of the time, especially in these melee situations. So monitoring your pet is very important. We got another round. I really like camouflage, just being able to start in stealth. Plus you look really cool. You look like the Predator. So we're going to start in stealth, kind of see where they're going to go, who are they going to attack, and who should I peel at the start of the game. So our Paladin's in a sleepwalk, our Warrior's isolated. So we just grapple in and pop cooldowns immediately with Spearhead onto the Shaman, and we're jumping in our tip of the spear onto our Butchery and our Wildfire Bombs. This is going to give us a lot of just AoE burst, again peaking 2 million DPS right in the opener. Survival might have some of the highest burst, but look, our pet is just immediately dead to Outlaw Rogue and Enhancement Shaman cleave damage, and with my pet being dead in this position, I'm probably going to have to use Aspect of the Turtle. Sometimes you can bait a lot of CC though, and maybe that's a good plan. Like if you just cast Res Pet like this, and they use Gouge and they use all this CC to stop you from getting it, then that CC isn't available for your partner. So sometimes you can use this kind of like precarious situation to your advantage and get yourself ahead for the game. We're going to pop our survival to fittest here, this little green icon that's going to reduce damage as our healer is in crowd control. Attempt to disengage away from the rogue, get a little bit of distance, but we're having a tough time counting with how much uptime they're getting, so we're going to have to use another charge of survival to fittest because we were just taking overwhelming unhealable amounts of damage. We're going to pop a Feign Death as well. Feign Death giving you a little bit of damage reduction through PvP talents is super important, and we're just lobbing in the Wildfire Bombs. So we're going to use Turtle this time. I tried to go for a Root Trap, and also root traps are a good way to like bait enemies to use like the grounding totem in that position, bait enemies to use blinks or mobility cooldowns to try and escape it, and then you can go for the actual freezing trap. And we managed to just kind of like clip out a ton of burst damage here. I'm not entirely sure if this was like fully intentional, considering the Preservation Evoker just loaded up a shroud to immune crowd control for the next couple of seconds, but you can definitely do a lot of damage. I really like the Tip the Scales playstyle, or tip the spear, dude. Tip the scales. There's too many tips in World of Warcraft at the moment. But keeping the Butchery bleed up, managing between kill command, giving you Tip of the Spear to buff your Wildfire Bombs or whatever else spell you want to go for. This type of like weaving is what I think puts it a little bit ahead, like more so on like a Feral Druid level tier of difficulty in that sense. And most of your abilities being aimed and having drawbacks definitely makes it a little bit more complicated, but it's a lot more fun and rewarding also when you're able to pull off these clutch plays like disengaging around a corner and then harpooning to your healer, to enemy healer to land a freezing trap. We're starting the game off with all of our cooldowns immediately. This is mostly just because the the ramp takes so long that I often just will send them and make sure that I can get more than one set of them in a game, because they're a 1-minute cooldown, and that was a big change for coordinated assault and spearhead. Having those on 1-minute cooldown, I think, has to make Survival Hunter have one of the most powerful offensive cooldown kits in the game. You got a nice little binding shot, explosive trap, knock the rogue away for a second, harpoon, freezing trap. It's always a really satisfying moment when you're playing Survival Hunter, when you're able to get that, and it's a nice advantage over the other Hunter specs who rely on either having to stun or having an ally to stun for them. We get a pre-survival of the fittest here on the smoke bomb. So again, you feel really cool when you're able to make a play like that. You can anticipate like, oh, they're about to send an attack and pre-wall. Disadvantage is that if you don't pre-wall, you die really fast. So again, this is the very high skill cap spec in that sense. We're using the stun here on the warrior because the healer is already on stun DR and he can't dispel the warrior. We got a bunch of burst damage off on the warrior with that. We're trying to kite away, but we get put into the kidney shot, and we don't really have a lot, but you can use the roar sacrifice, and you can also use diamond ice traps like this defensively onto DPS. This is something that I'm trying to feel out a lot more as well on my journey to 2400, is like how frequently as survival should you be using diamond ice on DPS versus healer, because in this instance I think scatter on healer can be good, because scatter on DPS is just going to break to random cleave damage. Our shaman is so low at this point, like 1% health. I'm really surprised I didn't shoot a scatter shot at any point. I'm wondering if I was just kind of fried. I've also been on a bit of a diet lately, and my brain has not been operating at 100% capacity, but scattering the healer during this time before Shroud was up, 100% needed to happen. It likely could have gotten us major cooldowns, maybe possibly a kill. I mean, look at the pressure that we've got at the moment, even despite that in this position. And this is part of the skill cap of the spec, right? Like, you have so many lines that you could possibly take in the game to constantly be aware of, that if you're not taking advantage of them, you're actually falling significantly behind, which is why I think it's a lot more of an advanced spec. But we're moving into round 4 out of 6. We got to try and find a way to turn this around. We got the Outlaw Rogue on our team. It's a lot more control and a lot less cleave damage likely coming into my pet, as the Outlaw Rogue is probably one of the highest cleave specs in the game. So hopefully we're going to be able to turn this lobby around for ourselves here. But this is kind of the pains of the Survival Hunter. I think this is why it's likely a lower popularity to that of something like a Beast Mastery Hunter, is that there are just so many possibilities. But if you want something that's more rewarding and gives you a sense of personal progression for your own skill, then Survival Hunter is going to be able to let you reflect on that 100%. It's going to be able to. So it's just a huge, like, you got to be like zoomer brain, like ready to go. So we get a sap on the paladin. We start off with all of our cooldowns with coordinated assault, spearhead, and we're getting cleave, butchery applied, and multiple wildfire bombs coming out, and we're just clapping. We get trinket lay on hands immediately. We're just cleaving multiple targets down, doing tons of damage. The opener is always really fun as Survival Hunter, as long as you start out aggressively like that with all your cooldowns. We're going to use disengage defensively in this matchup because our rogue has most of the CC, and we're likely not going to have to use that to kind of get to the paladin with harpoon and the control that the rogue has. Fortunately, I got kind of stunned there on my harpoon. I managed to still snipe it somehow without him being able to escape, but definitely a risky situation. Paladin with no trinket, 2 targets really low, and we're going for the kill. Always super fun when kill shot starts lighting up and explosive shot starts lighting up, because you just know that you're about to do really big damage. So it does have that nice element of proc play style. I like that you have the bleed maintenance with butchery, and you're trying to hit multiple targets with it to get even more benefits out of it. The binding shot's super satisfying. Explosive traps, super satisfying. These types of mechanics make playing Survival Hunter definitely a joy. We got a stun, we got a blind. I go for a trap as well, but didn't look like I was able to land it there. It would have been overlapped. It's solo shuffle, obviously, so there's gonna be some mistakes, but actually I did snipe the trap a little bit later, so ironically, perfectly timed mistake. And with that freezing trap, we are able to close out the game, doing monstrous amounts of damage. It seems like Outlaw Rogue is a really fun class to play with, and from my own observations of my own gameplay, which is why I think it's really good to do this type of stuff, which is VOD review, is to look at things that you're not doing. So something that I'm not doing is I'm not using flanking strike. And I think that I definitely should be. I think that this ability can hit really hard. So I'm going to need to, next time I'm playing, especially on my stream, if you want to follow live along with that, it's in the description down below. So make sure I'm using flanking strike, make sure I'm using roar sacrifice, and make sure I'm using mend pet. These are like advice tips to my past self to try and do better. And whenever I've done this, I've gone up usually the next time I play by like 100 to 150 rating. It's really that simple. So just sit down, look at your own gameplay, be like, what am I not using at the end of a game? You know, what am I missing out on some component of my class that would help me out? And we'll see if I'll be able to complete the challenge as a result of this or not. Stun, freezing trap, binding shot onto the DPS. I love that you can also play from range as well. I think using Aspect of the Eagle a little more could definitely help me in this lobby as far as getting distance from the rogue and not getting cleaved as hard as I have been. We're using Scorpion Sting on the paladin here to try and silence them. He's rotting down to the sacrifice damage, and we got good pressure on the warrior, good pressure on the rogue, kind of just still pulling away, not really wanting to get in distance. And here's the aspect of the eagle, which allows us to use our mongoose bite from range. We grapple over for a freezing trap, wildfire bombs, really satisfying animation, big damage on that. We got butchery available. I want to get that bleed on multiple players here if I can. Rogue ends up dodging it by just a second, but the warrior's so low, I want to keep going for it. Our shaman gets critically low. We're popping Emerald Communion. We're slowly but surely kind of coming back, but we're still it's still looking really dicey. Get a scatter shot onto the rogue, try and knock the rogue away, trying to keep him away from the shaman. Root trap as well, super fun ability to use. Grapple into freezing trap. I just feel like I'm completely in control of this game. Binding shot on the DPS, and it's nice to feel like you have that type of control with these kind of skill-oriented crowd control effects. It's just a really satisfying feeling when you're able to chain them together and kind of be the hero for your team in these types of moments. And now we've got our cooldowns again, so we're going to pop coordinated assaults, spearhead, butchery up, multiple wildfire bombs, and this is where our damage is going to start to spike. But the paladin searing glares us, which makes us miss attacks. So whenever you see searing glare, you want to try and kick that or use utility oriented spells. You can use your root trap, weirdly enough, when you are searing glared. So it just says like a tip if you're wondering like, what can I do? I'm glared, I can't use any spells, but you can actually land root traps with that. Multiple explosive shot procs. We want to try and trank shot off bops, and we are just doing so much cleave pressure at the moment. Next time we have a freezing trap here, we're luckily going to force a major cooldown, maybe win the game. You got that binding shot strategy again. I'm just lobbing those down on CD when I'm playing with a shaman who doesn't really have a stun to keep our pressure going, and we're just killing through healing. I don't even need the freezing trap. We're just straight up killing through healing, doing monstrous amounts of cleave. Seems like we're doing a better job in these later rounds of using Roar Sacrifice, but I still think flanking strike usage is low. And I definitely think using Aspect of the Eagle earlier on is definitely going to be something that I'm going to incorporate more into my future gameplay for Survival Hunter, if you were wondering. But in this position, I like starting out aggressively, coordinated assault, spearhead, pop every cooldown I've got to increase my damage because they're 1 minute. And so we get those as frequently as possible. And it's also really easy to land CC at the beginning of the game with Intimidation, Stun, and Freezing Trap. That's the easiest time to land a trap. You don't have to worry about pre-sacrifice or anything like that when you're trying to harpoon later on. So I think just using them early and often is really good. We'll harpoon in, go for a trap, we get stunned, not able to land it. But we're not too worried about it because we can just stun if we need to. We start with Scatter instead. So maybe we're going to trap DPS this round because using Scatter on the Paladin is kind of risky with it breaking. Searing Glare is up, so we're just going to pop Feign Death and a defensive cooldown to try and reduce some pressure. Binding shot down on them, knock the rogue away, try and focus on defense. I see a Stormbolt on the Paladin, so I'm just sending damage here onto the Shaman. Forces wall, we get a Sleepwalk, that gets tremored. Manages to recover, kite him through the Binding Shot. I think I used Turtle here because I didn't want to die like I did in one of the earlier games. You got to be really on point with Aspect of the Turtle with Survival Hunter. Sometimes you can just get totally caught. You get put into a kidney shot here with not a lot of defensive access, so we're going to wall immediately out of the stun. Turn it around. We got procs. Get rid of those procs as soon as possible. Start trying to use some kill commands. I think my pet is just randomly stunned right now or rooted or something. We want to be getting procs. I stunned the shaman to deny the tremor. Paladin bops it. And he should live as a result. So we're going to have to swap off the bop, hit the rogue for a second, try and kite away from him. Should be using concussive shot a little bit more here too on the rogue. So concussive shot's down. I got binding shot. Rogue just got stunned. It's DR'd, but I'm really low and our healer is CC'd. So I'm kind of just throwing binding shot here and just hoping I don't die, and diamond ice traps on the DPS, hoping that I don't die because of our limited situation. Scatter into sacrifice is a big mistake. So this red icon with the 8, this redirects damage to a paladin, and redirected damage will break certain crowd control effects, obviously. So you got to be careful of that. We got deep breath coming through though. We're ramping damage. I got multiple wildfire bombs. I got my cooldowns back. I'm ready to send my warriors blade storming. So we're just cleaving in the blender, doing as much damage as humanly possible. And that's something you should always aim to do. I'm still trapping DPS, trying to get control of them, mostly the rogue. So I'm sitting in kidney shot less, and the rogue is getting less pressure overall. And so that I can stay on top of the shaman, who is our kill target. It's going to be a lot easier to kill than the rogue. So we get a stun and a sleepwalk on the paladin. That forces bubble. We're getting closer on the rogue, but I don't want to get kidneyed, so I disengage out of range. And we managed to clutch it out. We get to 2398 as a result of that lobby. We managed to clutch it out. So you can see Survival Hunter is really tactical. It's got a lot of punishing mechanics as well, which is why I think it's likely not as popular. But if you're really dedicated to it, it can get insane performance and it can feel really satisfying. So those are the pros and cons of it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.